Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up, so talking through all of the books that I read in the first month of 2024. I know this is coming a little bit late, it is now middle of February, but I just didn't want to film last weekend, so I didn't. And now here we are. In the month of January, I read a total of 6 books coming to 3,247 pages. 4 of the books were fantasy, 1 was a sci-fi and 1 was a historical mystery. 5 of the books were adult, 1 was YA. I had some very good star ratings. I had 2 5 stars and 3, wait, that's not adding up, 2 5 stars and 4 4 stars. Not sure where that 6th and final book went when I did the star ratings thing. I finished off 1 series and I started 2 series, so that puts my on the go at 25. Those are the stats that got a little bit paused for a moment whilst I realised my maths was not mathsing and I couldn't add up to 6. So I feel as though January was like a month of 2 halves. The first couple of weeks I had some great time reading. Like, I read quite a lot, I was quite consistent, I was at home, and that meant that I did a lot of my reading. Most of these books I read in those first 2 weeks of January. I then had 2 weeks where I was travelling with work, which were very intense. It is such a privilege to be able to travel for work, but it is also quite draining and tiring, and I don't get that much reading time when I am travelling. So I had very limited reading successes during those 2 weeks, and then it was pretty much the end of the month, and that was that. Some highs and lows, but I got to 6, and I think they were quite long books in general, which is despite it only being 6 books, my page count was still over 3,000 pages, so still a very hefty amount of pages to have read, and most of that in 2 weeks. I started off the year with a reread, and then I ended the month as well with a reread. I did both of these rereads on audio, and that was books 1 and 2 in the Crescent City series, both by Sarah J. Maas. I was reading these in preparation for the 3rd book, which has come out at the end of January. I started it at the end of January and I have finished it in February, very recently actually, so that will be my February wrap up. But in January I started the year with House of Earth and Blood, read this in like 7 days, and then it took me like the whole rest of the month to read House of Sky and Breath. You can tell that I'm much more engaged in book 1 than I was in book 2, but then also travelling for work took over as well, which slowed me down. This time I did it with the audiobooks. That really helped me get through these because these are rather chunky. So if you don't know anything about this series, which probably would surprise me considering the amount of like buzz there has been about the 3rd book that has just come out. The first book, we're following a main character, Bryce, and at the beginning of the book she gets roped in to help with a case due to some personal investments in it. It is set in this world of Crescent City where there are a whole host of magical creatures, from fae to angels to werewolves to vampires, to anything you can really think of is going to be in this series, and it has a strong romantic plotline in it as well going throughout the series. I love this book. I absolutely love this first book. Like, it is such a fun ride, this book. So fun. This is one of my 5 stars, this first book in the series. I know some people say that there are slower parts in this one, but I find this one addictive all the way through, and then the ending is just even more explosive. So explosive. And some of the scenes towards the end of the book are so intense, and I was listening to this whilst on a run, and it was like my fastest run I've ever done. I got to the end, I was like, oh wow, that was quick. And I'm not like that great a runner, but I was just doing my local 5k, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I think I continued listening the next day on my next run, I was like, oh, so speedy. So obviously for me to do well at running, I need to be listening to the end of Crescent City 1 because it just gets everything going. I think there were moments where I was like, oh my god, this is so intense. Just keep running, Abby, just keep running, it's okay. And then there were moments where I was like, I need to run to like make sure I'm outrunning all the dangers here. So I think it is a very good like audiobook to run to. So I love this, absolutely love this. This one I like. Definitely more slower parts in this for me. It's not it has its faults. I think it needed tighter editing, probably 200 pages taken out of it. Some of the plot finessing and sort of tidying it up a little bit in this one. I mean, it was still enjoyable, but definitely not as enjoyable. And that would be how I describe it without spoilers. This was like a 4 star because it's still super enjoyable, but it's just not as good as this. It's not as good as my expectations for this series. Right, moving on. So I finished the Skyward series in January by reading Defiant, the fourth and final book in this series. I know that there's going to be like a spin-off series that's going to continue, I think, in this world, but I don't know if I'm particularly invested in reading that I'm quite happy with how this all wrapped up, and I don't feel the need to keep going. So the Skyward series, we're following a main character, Spencer, who at the beginning of the book is training to get into flight school, and her planet is constantly being bombarded by this alien force called the Krell, and so they're constantly in fear of being wiped out by them and are training younger and younger recruits to fight them in spaceships. And then everything gets a lot wider and broader from that first book, and the plot sort of, definitely gets broader. I'd say the first book is my favourite in the series. The first book is like the peak for me. Second book is pretty high, but it definitely has some issues around the third book. This was definitely a return to what I enjoyed in this series. I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed those first two books, but it was a significant improvement on Cytonic. I feel very happy with the way that this series wrapped up. I was very happy with the progression of the plot in this series, seeing all our characters and where they were getting to, and the sort of climactic ending of things. So I think this one was done well, and overall I'm satisfied with this series. It just feels like such a shame that it didn't continue to be as good as Skyward. I think Cytonic really brings the series down. I think Cytonic is a real low for this series. It is just such a shame about that one really bringing the series down. My love for the series is diminished because of that third book, but this one I enjoyed, and I'm very happy that it stuck that ending. My second Brandon Sanderson, although actually I read this one first, but I did read two Brandon Sandersons in January, so two Sarah J Maas books, two Sanderson books. I started the year with Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, so this was the first book I think I finished in the month, and this was also a 5-star book. So I really started the year strong with two 5 stars, being this one and my reread of Crescent City 1. So a very strong start to the year. I also started last year with two 5 stars back to back, so I really hope this energy just keeps continuing, because it's a good energy to have. It's a great energy. So this is one of the secret projects that was released last year. I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed this. I feel like I struggled to describe this, I think. Okay, so we follow two main characters that are in different worlds. One's called Yumi. She is sort of a religious figure in that world, and she has been trained and indoctrinated her whole life to feel as though she's important to society. She is trained to stack stones into art, and then if these stones get higher and higher and are more precarious but still balanced, then the spirits will come, and then the spirits will be commanded to do some menial tasks. Well, not menial tasks, but they'll be controlled to be a light or to support society. And then Painter is from a world of darkness, and he is trained to fight back these nightmares that come to invade the city all the time, that they're constantly trying to get in and create nightmares. And so to fight them, you paint them into something that is mundane, sort of like a boggart from Harry Potter, that you would recreate it into something that you are not afraid of. And their paths end up crossing quite bizarrely, uniquely, and they're spending their time trying to figure out why they are now linked. I really enjoyed their relationship together. I enjoyed the magic system. I found it very interesting. I mean, I found it very hard to describe just now, but I did find it very interesting to read about. I enjoyed the sort of twists and turns, the more romantic leaning nature of this story, the day-to-day things that these characters get up to, and their lives that they're living through in these magical worlds. Some of the Cosmo references as well, I feel as though there weren't too many in here, but there were a few, and seeing those I enjoyed, as well as sort of the quirky nature of it. That I feel as though with these secret projects, at least with the two that I've read, they're very different to Sanderson's normal style of writing, and it's really fun to sort of see him playing around with different techniques and playing around with different styles that I haven't really seen in his other Cosmo books. That I'd say they're a bit lighter, cozier, more romantic, at least with between Tress and this one, that they don't have the same seriousness as some of his other books, and I've quite enjoyed this style. I also read Fae Bound by Zara El Arifi. This is the first book in this new series by her. In this, we're following two main characters who are sisters Yurine and Lettel. Yurine is a warrior, and so she's a leader in one of the armies in this world. There are multiple sort of factions that are constantly at war amongst the elven people. So that's the society that we are brought into it to begin with. And then Lettel is a diviner, so she is able to look into and foresee potential futures. And at the beginning of the book, Yurine gets banished due to some misdemeanor in the army and is exiled from her community and from her tribe. And so she goes off with Lettel following her, and they come across the Fae people, who everyone believes is dead and long gone from this world. And they soon realise that they are not actually long gone from this world. They have just been in hiding for many, many years. So we are following them too as they integrate into the Fae society and the situations that they get up to there and the different peoples of this world. I would say I have some mixed thoughts on this book. That overall I enjoyed it, but I don't think it quite hit me in the same way as The Final Strife. The Final Strife I really, really enjoyed. Like, I enjoyed that one, I'd say, significantly more than this one. I think with this one, there were some pacing issues through it. So it's very quick in the beginning. It feels as though we know we need to get from the Elven lands to the Exile to the Fey lands. And that needs to be done and dusted, and then we can get on with the rest of the plot. So it felt as though that bit was quite rushed. Because it was like, this is where we need to be for the story to happen. So then I wasn't quite happy necessarily with like that start. And then when we're in the Feylands, I feel as though that the pacing is a bit better there. But at that point I was getting a little bit not frustrated with our characters maybe. I feel as though this book leans quite on the romantic side of things. That there are multiple romantic pairings that are explored in this book. And I don't feel as though the romance is done particularly well. The elements that I enjoyed in The Final Strife, and there were some romantic elements in that book, but I think the focus of that book is more on the plot and the military and the politics within the world. And I feel as though those are more of Zara El-Arifi's strengths, in my opinion, and not so much the romantic plotline. So I would prefer if this had focused more on the military side of things, on the politics, on the conflict that's going on between the elves, fae, humans, on the lore and the history and that side of things, as opposed to the romantic relationships, because I felt as though those romantic relationships didn't always have the build-up that I wanted to make them feel believable, that they were quite quick to come to fruition, and then I was like, oh, really? Really? I don't really root you two together, but I guess I should be rooting you two together. Can we like maybe focus on something else? Or because I feel as though she does a really good job with her lore and her world building. And maybe I just felt as though I'd have preferred some different focuses than what we got. But I am interested in continuing on with the series and reading more. But for right now, I feel as though The Final Strife is the series for me, more so than this one. I'd say this book felt a little bit rushed in general. I don't know how long Zara El-Arifi was writing it for, but I feel as though it could have done with just like another round of like editing and tightening up and finessing. But I do think this is a very pretty edition. I did end up getting an arc of this. Going into my childhood bookshop, I was handed an arc of this because my mum used to work there, so I was quite known in my like childhood bookshop, and they had an arc of this which I got in December, so I did read this slightly early, but only by like a week, and then I had already pre-ordered this edition by the time I read that. But I do think this edition is really pretty. It's got beautiful sprayed edges. This was the Waterstones one. I think the map is very, very pretty. And then the book that I managed to read whilst I was travelling for work was Curious Beginning by Veronica Speedwell. This is the first book in the Veronica Speedwell mystery series, so there's quite a few of them. I think there are like 8 out, and a 9th one coming out in soon, next month, very soon. So I thought, I've had this for quite a while. I decided to start it. I really enjoyed this. This was quite a lot of fun, and I feel like it was a really good book to read while travelling because it was quite easy to dip in and out of and consistently feel engaged in it. We're following a main character, Veronica, and at the beginning of the book, her aunt has just died. She had been brought up by her 2 aunts. So I don't think they're actually related, but aunts. The second one has just died. and she has been at her funeral, and then following the funeral she goes back to her house to find the dish has been broken into, and there's a whole lot of mystery going around about who Veronica is and why people are trying to abduct her. So she ends up in London pairing up with our other main character, Stoker, and it is them trying to avoid these people that are constantly trying to abduct Veronica, and understanding her history and why these people might be after her, and the sort of twists and turns of that, and uncovering this mystery. I enjoyed seeing the relationship between Veronica and Stoker. Nothing really much happens here, but I feel as though it's something that I can start rooting for. That I'm guessing it's going to be quite a slow burn from what I've heard, that maybe over the course of many books there could be some tension brewing between the two of them. I'm excited to see how that develops. I think the mystery was done well. It leaves enough like open ends for what's going to happen next, and seeing where things are going to develop, but it wraps up enough that you feel satisfied with it. So I'm definitely interested to continue on with this series. I am annoyed that they have messed up the editions in the UK here. So I did not realise this, but this is the UK edition, and they have UK editions of books 2 and 3, but this is an 8, soon to be 9 book series, and they do not have editions for books 4 through 8. And I couldn't see if there was any plans to create books for those, because those books have been out for quite a few years, and so are these ones. Like, these aren't newly published, like these must have been published when these books were published, and they haven't made they didn't continue the series. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do about my editions? Because I know that I want to continue this series, which means I'm going to have to switch at some point to the US editions. How do I manage my edition situation? Because, you know, as a book reader, you want your editions to match. I mean, I know I don't always have matching editions. I know my Greenbone Saga looks an absolute mess. I know it does. But ideally, I would like matching editions. I've committed to the US ones now, and the US ones are easy enough to find for books 4 onwards, but books 2 and 3, because the UK ones are around, have been a bit of a challenge. So I ordered them like 2 weeks ago. They still haven't arrived. Hopefully I will be able to get US editions going forward, and we'll see when book 2 and 3 eventually turn up, because I would like to continue on, and right now I can't. And I was like, if I just ordered the UK ones, they would have arrived the next day, but then I would be stuck with not matching editions for many books in the series. So so annoying. Anyway, besides the point, I enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars, but I feel like there's great potential for the series. So those are all of the books that I finished in the month of January. I did start Fireborn by Rosaria Munda, and I am 142 pages in, but then I put it down because Crescent City 3 came out, so I also started that one. I do need to go back to this. I just haven't. I don't know, I wasn't as obsessed as I thought I was going to be, but maybe the obsession will come. So I did start this not very far in, and yes, Crescent City 3. So those are everything that I read in the month of January. Let me know how your reading in January went, and how your reading in February is now going, so seeing as we are midway through. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!